On July 21st, 2023, a little over 1 year ago, I made the final video in a series critically analyzing the superhero genre, with special emphasis on My Hero Academia. Among the comments and discussions that spun out of this video is one in particular that I've kept in mind. Because I made a bet. A solid argument is made here by username Sleepless Brazil Limbo, the crux of which is that the main theme of My Hero Academia is not about heroes and villains, it's social inequality, which is a point I would agree with if Horikoshi was a competent writer. There's more that they said, and I gave an in-depth response, but the conclusion I came to was this. If I'm wrong and I lose the bet, I will include a personal apology and shout out to you in a future video on this subject, for having more insight than I do. So, Sleepless Brazil Limbo, I'm so sorry, I wish I wasn't right. This is part 1 of a series exploring My Hero Academia's disappointing ending, and in this short video to kick the series off, I'll be making heavy reference to the points made in this conversation. Also, obvious spoiler warnings for the end of My Hero Academia. My initial response to Sleepless was that if Horikoshi really wanted to tell a story of inequalities and dichotomies, instead of just using those themes as lazy set dressing, then by the end of the series, there should be something in the narrative which showcases fundamental changes made within society to address those inequalities. As well as, I'm betting that what Horikoshi will actually do is pay lip service to the idea. And lazy set dressing and paying lip service is essentially what happens in the last few chapters. Here's an example of what I mean. In chapter 429, we see a reflection of Shigaraki's origin. A nameless boy, abused and neglected, finding himself in the outside world, and desperately needing the help of a kind stranger. This is bare minimum, to be honest. This is the least you could do as a writer to show how society is changing, due to the influence of heroes. Where Tenko was rejected and became Tomura through All for One's corruption, this child could instead be saved by a simple, kind gesture. Do you know what a good writer would do? A good writer would show the ripple effects, the legacy created by that kind gesture. Because what happened to that boy? Who did he become? What impact did he come to have on the people around him, positive or negative, after he himself was helped? We will never know, because Horikoshi completely forgets that he exists in the very next chapter. And this is the first failing I will highlight in Horikoshi's writing. The world beyond your main characters is just as important as they are, because it gives shape and substance to the narrative. Horikoshi consistently fails to properly show this. Showcasing inequality and the hardships created by an unequal system means absolutely nothing unless you create a sense of parity. If 8 years have passed, then that passage of time represents the perfect opportunity to show a different kind of reflection of Tomura Shigaraki's narrative. To use that nameless child to show what Tomura could have been had he received the help he needed at the time. A narrative step that would have brought his story full circle. But this doesn't happen because the child being saved is nothing more than set dressing, Horikoshi paying lip service to the idea without actually exploring it in full. And that's why I love the points of discussion in this conversation. Sleepless is showing a high level of narrative insight here. All for One's importance to the narrative, contrasted against Overhaul being a narrative foil. The Tartarus prison break, Stain and Redestro giving insight into society at large, public perception of and obsession with heroes overshadowing salient philosophies presented. All of this would go further towards world building if the world presented wasn't such a sloppy mess, which Sleepless also agrees with me on. Except, I still think that all of these things are just further examples of set dressing and paying lip service to ideas, and I'll be exploring that distinction in part 2 and beyond. The major part of my bet was this prediction, depending on the time skip at the end. The furthest I see it going is having some superficial, everyone has the potential to be a hero in their own way message, and we might see Kota and Eri, along with a few of the small children who've shown up in the story, all at UA going through the same hero courses, and cameos of the old UA students like Deku, Ochako, Todoroki, and Bakugo being pro-heroes and or the new faculty of UA. And I didn't expect to predict the ending more than a year ago to a T, but the fact that I did raises questions about what makes the ending so predictable. In my opinion, this is one of the things that can result from a writer whose lack of skill leads them to avoid narrative consequences. To illustrate to this point, and since Horikoshi is a fan of Western superhero comics, and especially of Marvel, we'll use a specific run of Marvel Comics as an example. The Invincible Iron Man, Volume 5, written by Matt Fraction from 2008 to 2012. And in particular, a specific event from this run, from issues number 1 to number 6. You remember this guy, right?
Tony Stark was able to build this in a cave! With a box of scraps!
Well, in the comics, Obadiah Stane had a son by the name of Ezekiel Stane, and I have to tell you, this is some of the best Marvel has ever done in terms of its modern comics. I won't get too much into spoilers, but to summarize, Ezekiel Stane sought to use Tony's technology against him, creating a terrorist organization, employing living weapons, and killing countless civilians, all in an effort to bring Tony Stark to his knees. And in a sense, it actually works. Because in order to defeat Ezekiel, Tony is forced to pull the plug on all of his tech. By activating a global kill switch, Tony renders all Stark tech across the entire world inert and inoperable. Tony Stark destroys his life's work in order to stop Ezekiel from using his stolen tech for murderous means. A good writer puts their characters into tough situations where they, and everyone around them, are forced to live with the consequences of their decisions. Like was once said by the late legendary Lance Reddick, as his character Philip Broyles in the TV show Fringe,
"There are times when the only choices you have left are bad ones."
This is often the case with being a hero, something that Horikoshi never actually does even once in the entirety of My Hero Academia. You could point to Midoriya sacrificing his powers, or Enji Todoroki attempting to sacrifice his life, but neither of these decisions impacted anyone else in a significant way except for them themselves. And these decisions were never presented as moral quandaries. Do note that Tony shutting down all of his technology globally would also have a negative impact on everyone who depended on that technology in their daily lives. Which is a moral quandary. Hell, the one moral quandary we see in My Hero with Hawks killing Best Jeanist is just subverted later when we see that Best Jeanist is still alive. And for every other hero showcased in the final chapter, not only do none of them have to deal with truly harsh consequences, we see them all living in a world free of any consequence. The world is essentially the same as what we saw in chapter 1. Every presumed change to society is literally showcased as lip service, because it's not that Horikoshi doesn't understand what show don't tell means, he is simply incapable of actually doing so. We'll be elaborating more as this series goes on, so stay tuned for part 2 in a few weeks. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe for more videos, and hit the noti bell to get updates on the rest of this series as it's uploaded. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.